ከዚህ ጋርም ቢሆን ይገባል። To give you introduction, my show is called the Afro Desk, and on Afro FM 105.3, and we invite guests from various fields and with different issues like we have here. And that's to give you some introduction about my show. And I would start by saying welcome to the Afro Desk, Mr. Nebil. Enterprise Partners has a vision to achieve by 2020, that is to see a private sector that grows sustainably and creates value by transacting with poor women.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think the lives of the poor can be improved through market in general?
Okay, thank you, and thank you for having me on the show. I just want to say I'm a big fan of Afro FM, and it's great to be on here today. So basically, the goal of what we do is really to support poor people, particularly women, to really be part of the economic growth as much as possible that we're seeing in Ethiopia. There was a famous Prime Minister in China who said, for the first time, when they moved from communism to capitalism, he said, some people will have to become richer before others. But what's happened in many countries is that it's taken a long time for other people to catch up. And our program really, Enterprise Partners really is about helping and supporting people to catch up as quickly as possible so that all this economic growth goes through as much of society as possible.
Mm-hmm. Given your ultimate goal to change the lives of the poor, who are the poor in your reference?
That's a good question. The poor we define in many ways, but basically what we're talking about here is somebody who is economically active, who wants to work, who wants to be entrepreneurial, who wants to make their lives better, who is coming from poverty, which is defined in many ways, but sometimes people say $1.25 a day is their income, but we don't follow a strict definition like that. We really talk about the vast majority of Ethiopians that we know are struggling in this world and are looking for an opportunity to grow.
Mm-hmm. What have been your major interventions since your establishment here in 2013?
So we've had a lot. We've obviously built the organization, we've added sectors and developed now many different sectors across cotton, textile, garment, livestock and leather sectors, fruits and vegetables, and in the financial sector we've also been working in small medium enterprises. We've been working with people who have had no access to the financial sector before to bring them access for the first time. We've also been working with big businesses also to attract finance in order to expand. So we've worked across many different sectors and we've trialed a lot of different things, and when I say trial we mean pilot. And so we've had quite a lot of success in some areas, medium success in other areas, and in other areas we've had less success. And the way we work is to say, well, what's working and let's put more resource and energy into that, and what's not working and let's close that down. So I think where we are now after 3 years is a very clear idea of which sectors are having much more potential for us to have impact, and which sectors are having less. And we, just to give you examples, we've worked with thousands of small and medium entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, to get access to finance for the first time. Many of them have gone from employing 1 or 2 people to employing 10 or 20 people as a result of being able to get access to finance and business services. We've worked with farmers in the rural communities all across the country in different areas, but the key is linking them to markets and linking them to good markets. So I can't pick on any one because we have, I think, so many interesting things to talk about.
Okay. As part of your interventions, you have a philosophy called making markets work for the poor and not for me. Is there some kind of market failure in this sense where the poor is neglected?
Well, it's a fact that there are many business opportunities in Ethiopia, and many businesses will go to these opportunities that have the most profit. But there are many, many business opportunities that will create lots of jobs, like in some cases factories and farms and labour-intensive businesses. And there are also businesses that don't create a lot of jobs. So you could have a trading business that has 1 billion birr of trading, but they may employ 2 people in the shop and someone to drive a truck. So we focus on really developing the businesses that have the most impact on the poor and showing business the profitability of doing that. A lot of the time what's missing is that people don't know that there is a market or how profitable it is. And so that's really our job, is to work with businesses to develop those markets versus the ones that don't have as much impact, with what's basically a limited amount of capital in this country.
You're not a business organization, are you?
We're not a business. We are a social enterprise that is funded by the UK Department for International Development as a program. And we don't do business, we don't look to make a profit. We work with businesses and look for them to make a profit while having social impact. And our goal is about supporting specifically that they get into those markets and really deliver social impact in their business.
Is cost of labor really cheap in Ethiopia? Because the issue of labor cost has become one of the investors' arguments, that cost of labor is not cheap in Ethiopia in parallel with the effectiveness and efficiency level of the labor force in the country. So, is the cost?
Yeah, that's the question of the day. The price of labor in Ethiopia is lower than in other countries, that's a fact. Than in other countries that we're competing with. Maybe not in Africa, but if we're competing with the Chinese, if we're competing with the Vietnamese, if we're competing with the Indian, for investors, then the cost of the labor is cheaper. But that doesn't mean that our labor is cheap, because we also have to look at the fact that the labor, the people that are working, it's about how much they produce. If I want to sell you something, you look at the value of it as well as the price. You don't just say, how much does it cost? You say, well, what's the value of that relative to the price? And if the value is more than the price, you say it's cheap. If the value is less than the price, you say it's expensive. So what we do is really focus on developing the skills of the labor in Ethiopia, not just to make them cheaper, but actually, and more valuable, I would say, that in my definition of cheap, but to really make them paid more. So to say, look, I might cost this, I might cost X, but if I can deliver 2 times what I can deliver, pay me 2 times. And that's what we focus on, is creating that win-win. And that's what we mean when we say making markets for all, so that it's the factories are benefiting, the owners, the investors, but also the labourers and the people working in there. And so we don't look at it as cheap, we don't look at it as expensive, we just look at it as an opportunity to increase value.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me take you to the recent project agreement signed to source, recruit and train 30,000 textile and garment workers for the newly completed Hawassa Industrial Park. And you have said that the agreement signed is public-private partnership into model. What makes this agreement a unique model?
This is an interesting intervention. This is a global first that's been done in the manufacturing industry. It's a public-private partnership because it's taking a problem for everyone, which is that a lot of factories cannot source or find, cannot train, and cannot develop the workforce that they need on their own. It's been tried in other parts of Ethiopia, and when you say to the factories, you have to find your own workers, you have to screen them, you have to train them, it's too much. And those services don't exist. The services have been tried to be done by the private sector as well, and it's very, very difficult. So what we've got here is a unique model to use the Bureau of Labour and Social Affairs and the Bureau of Trade and Industry in the southern region and their extensive job seekers database. But to combine that with also the government's Textile Institute that has a clear understanding of what are the types of skills that the factories need, so that people can be screened to say, who's going to be more appropriate for stitching, who's going to be more appropriate for cutting, who's going to be more appropriate for packing. And this is based on screening criteria. And then combining that with the factory's own demand and the factory's own trainers, as well as private sector trainers. And putting all these three together in one system and one process is a global first. What's interesting is that also the factories have said, we will pay for this service, because it's much easier to just pay for an efficient service to work well than everyone try to do it on their own. And so we now have a system where the factories will be paying for these part government, part private services, which we think will solve a massive problem that other factories, particularly in Addis Ababa, have been facing.
Have you ever tried to calculate the impact other than the industry park, outside of the industry park?
Yes. First and foremost, it's initially 30,000. It'll be 60,000. Mostly women, some men. Most of them, I think over 90% of them, will be sending money back to their families. So when they get, including the training that we're giving, training on financial education, how to save for the future, how to support your family, how to look after your current needs, how to balance all of those different things, we think that's going to have a massive impact across the region. The second thing we see is that the very first thing you have to understand is a lot of these people who are going to be getting these jobs in the factories, these are typically 18, 19, 20-year-old women who, for the first time, are going to be leaving their houses. And their choices in life have now just been improved, because previously their choice would have been maybe either to get married or to stay dependent on their families, or to look for maybe some work in the construction industry or in the Middle East or so on. And this is an option that I think appeals to them a lot more than those other options. And so what we think the impact of this will also be is for basically young girls in Ethiopia to really see that they can build a future on their own, they can get skilled, they can get trained, they can work, they can save money, they can have a business, they can become a senior employee. So we're quite excited about the impact financially and non-financially that this is going to have on families up and down the country.
In this South nations and national people's region trade and industry bureau say already that of the needed it has completed sourcing of 25,000 workforce. And what was your role to that?
So this has been a fantastic collaboration. We've been working with the Southern Region government from when the database started, I think at about 8,000 people, and now it's come all the way through to 25,000. So the first thing we've been doing is supporting to understand kind of what is the demand, what are the criteria. So those 25,000 people, are they age 18 to 25, or are they age 16 to 30? And so we worked with the investors to say, what age groups do you want, what age groups do... So we coordinated quite a lot of information. The second thing is to say 25,000 is just the beginning, because to employ 30,000 and then 60,000 people, you need to have maybe in the database 100 to 200,000 people, because today in Hawassa there are 50,000 jobs in the city. When you now bring 30,000 people extra in there who are going to have salaries, who are going to spend that money on whether it's food, tea, coffee, transportation, all sorts of things, that's going to create a much bigger economy in the city that is going to create a lot more jobs. So actually the work with the government there is about not just the jobs for the industrial park, but really the growth of the city and managing the workforce needs for that.
As it was clearly stated during the time that supply shortage of skilled labor and high labor turnover have remained one of the major challenge for the sector. How do you mitigate this as a major challenge where there is still high labor force graduating from various training and vocational institutions across the country? How do you mitigate this? There are a lot of young energy coming from these institutions, and at the same time we are talking about shortage of.
Yeah, it's a paradox, and I'm glad you asked that question, because we have, maybe 45 million people below the age of 25, so there cannot be a shortage of labor. What there is a challenge of is the skill level needed for that labor to get into the factories. Many of these people have the technical skills, as you said, they've come out of Tibet colleges, so they have the technical ability. What we focus on is the soft skills, and those are the soft skills that I think make the difference between someone who is going to be promoted and going to become the CEO of a company and someone who isn't. It's generally not the technical skills that make the difference between really high-performing individuals, workers, and non-high-performing. So what we focus on very much is taking the Tibet curriculum and building soft skills components on that. And luckily we've actually trained now 136 Tibet trainers, so that this becomes also part of the Tibet curriculum. And a new curriculum has been designed by the Ethiopian Textile Institute. And the focus now is much more on making them much more appropriate for the needs of international investors competing in global markets. Mm-hmm. And that's the next step for this country.
I think I can be sure that you have Chinese investors inside that compound, mm-hmm. and the Chinese have their own technique to deliver these soft skills. Mm. Did you integrate, or do you have any integration mechanism with that?
It's very interesting, because most of the investors that came to the industrial park said to us, look, we know how to make t-shirts, we know the techniques, the technical techniques, but what we don't understand is Ethiopia. We are new to Ethiopia, is what they've all said. And what we want to understand, we want to get inside the minds of the people that are going to be working in our factories, and we want to understand how to convert them into, as I said, globally competitive workforce. So actually they've been interested to learn from Ethiopian, to say what is the cultural context, the social context, how do these people perform, because they recognize that the formula for China is not the same as the formula for Ethiopia, even in a Chinese company. So it's been a partnership, and we've been working with local consultants, local trainers, government institutes, to really work, as I said, hand in hand with the investors, with all of them, to come up with the right formula. And now I'm glad to say that the curriculum has just been published, and many people are very excited about the results.
I think this has much to do with effectiveness and efficiency of those labor forces. So, what is the mechanism there to integrate this to the technique that's coming from abroad and the local or the homemade one?
Yeah, I think it's not a surprise, and it's not a secret. I think these are some basic principles of organizations, like teamwork, like communication, like the importance of planning, and then some of the soft skills around health and safety, around hygiene, around just some of those basic foundations. So there are not many secrets here. The question is the transmission mechanism. How do you communicate these things effectively so that people understand them, and how do they understand you? And this is what we've been doing a lot with the HR departments in these factories, is really working on how do we communicate with the workers. As you know, many HR departments do payroll processing, they do basic administration, but there are some HR departments that really think about the lives of the people working there and how to improve those lives inside the organization and outside. And a lot of the good thing that I found is with some of these foreign investors particularly, they're thinking about the whole life of the person and the people, these 30,000 that are going to be working with them, and how to make that better. So they're on a learning curve themselves in this country.
Well, this project is putting over 54.7 million Ethiopian birr, and the workers are expected to generate estimated wages of 325 million Ethiopian birr per year, with the minimum wage rate to be 900 per month. This simply takes us to a minimum rate of below 2 USD per day for individual, which is around 1.5 USD. Therefore, do you think the workforce is earning enough money given the expensiveness of the skyrocketing living standard that we see around?
It's a good question. I think the cost of living is a challenge for almost everyone in Ethiopia. I don't think any one of us finds the cost of living comfortable. But the people who are earning some of the lowest salaries are the ones most affected by it. And these factory workers will absolutely be the same. And what we are putting in place here, I just want to be clear, is a system that is training these people and is incentivizing the factories to continually train and develop, build the skills, move the productivity. So the factory worker in Ethiopia today and the factory worker in Ethiopia tomorrow, in terms of productivity, there is a difference of about 10 to 20 times. Our workers can be 10 to 20 times more productive. So you can do the same calculation on the pay. You said $2. So it can be 10 to 20 times more. In China, the factory workers in textiles used to earn very similar wages. Today, a factory worker in China in the textile industry can earn up to $2,000 a month. Just at the factory floor, not a supervisor, not a manager. So we have to go on the same path, but unless we have a training system in place, a skill system in place, we will stay at the bottom of the value chain. And in fact, not only that, but we will be pushed even further lower to compete with others. So we cannot compete on cost over the long run. We cannot have what we call a race to the bottom. Because there will be other countries that will say, I can produce cheaper than Ethiopia. We cannot do that. We have to say we're racing to the top, which is where China has been going, where Europe has gone, where the US has gone, Korea, Sri Lanka has done that. But the foundation for that is a skills system that works, that can take people from low productivity to high productivity. And that's the goal of this country.
Given the training and skill you are putting on those labor force, don't you think there is a room to suggest better wage rates?
All right. I think it's a good point. Part of what we're also training these people on is to understand what are your rights. What are your rights to associate with other workers, to negotiate your pay, to ask for more pay as your skills increase and as your productivity increases, as your experience increases. And so one of the, again, parts of which is what I call soft skills training, although by no means is it soft, is to understand actually what are your rights and what are the things that you should be negotiating for? What is the future for you in this industry? Is it to stay exactly the same? No. So what is that path? What's important is to say that the companies are also committed. The companies didn't come here to say, let's get the cheapest labor and let's continue. That is not what they came here for. They came here to say, we have a lot of potential in Ethiopia. And they came and they're investing hundreds of millions of dollars because of the potential. And that potential is in the people.
Do you have future plans with upcoming industrial zones?
Absolutely. We've been discussing with different people. It's at an early stage. But quite a few people who are building industrial parks in Ethiopia have been asking us whether we can work with them similarly. And I'll be quite excited to make the announcements when we're ready.
What are your models? You told me earlier that you have a homegrown model, you have some kind of integration tactics. Do you think you will be well received by others coming, especially from East?
By the East, you mean?
Eastern world.
East Asia.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I think so. There's been quite a lot of appetite across the board for any business model that can take raw talent and develop that into being really highly productive employees. I think there's no business in Ethiopia, there's no business in the world that would not want a business model that can develop its people. So we're expecting that what we started with one industrial park and one group of stakeholders will be replicated across at least the 10 industrial parks that the government are building, but hopefully many, many more factories. And what's actually quite interesting is we've now been approached by quite a lot of private factories. There was one factory that is going to be employing 10,000 people, for example, to say, how can we have such a similar system? And the great thing is that the business model that we are promoting here is something that can be replicated anywhere for anyone. Because it's based on a simple principle, which is if the factory pays 1 month's salary to find one worker and to build their soft skills, then the business that provides that service, which includes the government, will go wherever they can get the demand for that service. And our role has only been to build the business model, to test it, and to take some of the initial risk out of it. Now that it's been tested and it's been successful, the 60 million Ethiopian budget that you mentioned, which is for the project, that's mostly paid for by the private sector. And that's sustainable.
Where will be enterprise partners then after 2020?
I think we're quite interested to continue doing what we do. At this current phase of the project, it's really about proof of concept. Does a social enterprise like Enterprise Partners that builds markets have a place? And I think what we're finding is that in many markets that we work in, it does. In some markets where the conditions are not right, it also doesn't. And so the partnerships that we're building, the initiatives that we're building are all expected to go way beyond 2020. Now, whether we as an institution need to continue beyond 2020, our mission might be done, so we have to determine that. But just to be clear, we want to be able to get to a place where we are no longer needed. Whether that is 2020, I don't know.
Anything you would like to add?
I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of your series and the show, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Nebil Kellow. Thank you very much.